Good evening, everyone, and looks like we're virtually starting this on time, so thank you for your patience as we move to our council meeting, Monday, July 15th. I would like to make a couple of announcements. First, that all public who are in attendance are requested to sign the attendance sheet on the side. Please ensure that your cell phones are off, and this meeting is audio and video recorded. At this point, I'd like us to stand for the singing of O Canada, and the petition will be read off by Councillor Gannan following. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We gather to make decisions for our community. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens.
Thank you. You may be seated. Councillors, are there any changes in order of items on the agenda? Seeing none. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary and or conflict of interest? I have one here I'd like to note, and that is Councillor Trombetta, read June 24 council minutes, confidential item, solicitor client advice, legal matter, possible LPAT appeal for rezoning application submitted by Sandra Gibson. Councillor Trombetta declared a conflict of interest, disclosure of pecuniary interest with respect to confidential item 2A of the June 24, 2019, being a solicitor-client advice legal matter, specifically a possible LPAT repeal for rezoning application submitted by Sandra Gibson. Councillor Trombetta advised that he lived in proximity to the proposed facility and that this may affect his judgment with respect to the application. Councillor Trombetta provided a written declaration of this in regard and left closed session deliberations once he declared the conflict of interest of pecuniary interest with respect to the issue. Any other conflicts or pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Are there any members of the public at this time present who wish to address a specific item as permitted by Section 6.7 of the procedural bylaw? Any members of the public at this time? So take the chair there and state your name and address and...
My name's Robert Chileo. I'm at 7574 Regional Road 20. My main concerns with the changes that are proposed is just the barrier that was proposed was 6 feet tall. But judging by the height of the trailers that I can see currently from my property and potential future uses of the property and noise, I would request a 12-foot barrier between the properties. Also, a big concern is the drainage, and I just want to make note and request that it is considered during the planning process, because with what's been happening in the past few months and on that property has caused a little bit of a drainage problem for my property. And the third request would be to keep the property inside the hamlet line of residential property. just because it is, from my property line to the hamlet line is not a big space. And for that to become rezoned in different use would affect our property. So that can be considered. And that's all.
And that's, just for clarification for the public, that's with respect to Section BD, the application that's being considered this evening by C-Cards Holiday Campers.
Yes.
Report PD 116-19.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else wishing to speak? Mr. Merritt?
I'm Carl Merritt from 7558 Regional Road 20. Yeah, our biggest concerns are that fencing and lack of it, and the drainage issues when we get down to that site plan part of it, that they're properly dealt with. Anything I've read in here from the township's recommendations, I'm pretty much in agreement with, so you know, if we can come to that point, I think that's acceptable.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on a matter, any matter that's in the agenda? Qualify that. Seeing none, we have some appointments and presentations. I would like to, at this time, call up Justin DeClaire, Manager of Assurance and Accounting Audit, MNP, 2018 Draft Financial Statements and Audit Results.
Good evening, Mayor Bilsma and members of council. I'm here today to present more of the audit results. Management will be presenting the statements for approval by council tonight. Couple of things that I wanted to just address where there's changes to the audit report this year. If you're familiar with the previous audit report, some of the required communications, essentially the audit results and steps to issue the final financial statements. So the first, if you had a chance to review the financial statements, you may have noticed the audit report has changed. The opinion, essentially some geographical changes, has moved to the top, and the Canadian audit standards now have a little more in-depth management responsibility and auditor's responsibility, which is, I think, quite important just to remind management, those charged with governance, and auditors what the responsibilities are over the statements. And in a nutshell, as an auditor, it's not a forensic audit. We are essentially gathering enough evidence to express an opinion that the financial statements of the town are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. If I believe information was provided, report to council. I believe everyone received a copy. I'm just going to go over a very high level of that. There's a required communication that we are independent of management and those charged with governance, which would be the council. So there's an independence letter report based on that. As far as the results go, it was a very smooth audit. There was no issues that were noted. I think management should be commended that there was no significant deficiencies in internal control. I think they worked really hard over the past year to basically clear any of those issues. There were no, there was just a couple recommendations covering some of the estimates around the contaminated site liability and the employee benefits, but those are to be considered for future periods as they're not material to the statements and their future considerations. As far as adjustments go, there was only 2 reclass items, one which was corrected and the other one was an immaterial reclass balance sheet amount. So from there, all we will need to do is obtain signed representations from management, and then we'll be able to issue a clean audit report.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions to the presenter? Seeing none, thank you very much, and I'll do just that. I'll commend the staff by your recommendation for their diligence and hard work in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I would also like to call up Diana Tang and Melanie Sagan Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention, Public Health, Niagara Region. I think, is Garrett coming back, or did he offer up his seat? Yeah, we're not going to make you stand and everyone else in the room sit. Yeah, they can move that one back and forth. It's flexible.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having us here tonight. I'm really pleased to be here with my colleague Melanie Seguin to give you an update on our proposals to the smoke-free bylaw amendments, the smoke and vape-free bylaw amendments. So I'm not too sure if you guys have the presentation on your screens, if you're able to follow along. Is there something?
There we go.
There we go. So this is just an agenda of the items that we're going to speak to tonight. We're going to give you an update on the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, then we'll tell you about the research in relation to tobacco, cannabis, and vaping products. Then we'll give you an update on the public consultation and the municipal consultations that have occurred, followed by the recommendations that we're making moving forward. So what you see in front of you is really a timeline of policy and legislation that has occurred both in Niagara and also in the province of Ontario. So you can see that over time, the legislation has strengthened in terms of where people can or cannot use tobacco products. So what I can tell you from this is from 2007, the rate of current smokers within Niagara was 26.3%. And by 2014, that rate dropped to 17.5%. And what we can see is that strengthening the policy has led to decreased use of tobacco products. Last year in October 17th, 2018, as you're all well aware, cannabis products were legalized for the first time in Canada. And with that change also came a change to our provincial legislation in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. And when that occurred, there was a misalignment between our local bylaw, which was only applied to tobacco products, versus the provincial law, which was now applied to tobacco, cannabis, and vaping products. So earlier this year, we went through an approval process to achieve triple majority, so in May of 2019, to approve an interim bylaw which would include tobacco, cannabis, and vaping products to our local bylaw. And it's an interim bylaw for 1 year to allow us enough time to conduct a consultation and to do the research. So that's what we're here to update you on today. So when we look at the tobacco research, we can benefit from decades of research in relation to the effects of tobacco on people and secondhand exposure. What we know is that smoking tobacco is the leading cause of preventable disease and death. The World Health Organization indicates that there's no safe level of exposure to secondhand tobacco smoke, and it supports 100% smoke-free policies in both indoor and outdoor spaces. We know that in Ontario, over 16,000 deaths are related to tobacco use every year, and $7.5 billion are spent every year on healthcare and loss of productivity from tobacco exposure. So when we're talking about creating legislative restrictions, we know that there are multiple benefits. So the first benefit is to decrease exposure to secondhand tobacco smoke. The second one is really to help those people that are trying to quit smoking so that they're not continually exposed to the visual cues of seeing other people use product. And the third one is really to decrease prevalence and normalization of use and make it less socially acceptable so that our youth don't initiate using product, okay? When we looked at cannabis research, as I had mentioned already, cannabis was only legalized a couple of months ago, so the research in relation to cannabis is quite slim. What we were able to find were 2 systematic reviews on the health impacts from cannabis exposure. And what they found was with sufficient exposure, there was eye irritation, you could find metabolites in your body fluid, and there would be psychoactive effects. Now, these research studies were conducted on a short-term basis and were conducted within unventilated rooms. Once they ventilated those rooms, the effects from the cannabis exposure either decreased or were eliminated from ventilation. What we do want to let you know, though, is that cannabis smoke has also been found to contain many of the same cancer-causing chemicals that are found in tobacco smoke. So what we can say from that is that cannabis smoke has the potential to also lead to heart disease and lung disease, which we know is caused from tobacco exposure. The third product we wanted to give you an update on in terms of research was e-cigarettes or vaping products. So there were several systematic reviews in relation to the health impacts from secondhand e-cigarette vapor exposure. And what they found was there was increased cotinine in the blood with exposure to the vapor, and that means that there was a nicotine metabolite within their blood. The second thing they found was that there is increased particulate matter, heavy metals, and nicotine with exposure to vapor. But they were significantly less than being exposed to a conventional tobacco product. What we also know is that youth are currently increasing use of vaping products significantly, to the point where the U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams in December of 2018 issued that e-cigarette use within youth is actually an epidemic within the USA. Health Canada similarly has conducted 2 rounds of consultations this year alone. Most recently, their consultation was in relation to reducing youth access and appeal of vaping products using regulatory measures. Research is demonstrating that if youth and young adults have not used products at all, they're less likely to use tobacco products. So if a youth has never used tobacco or an e-cigarette product, their chance of then using a tobacco product was 7.9%. If they started using a vaping product, their chances of using a tobacco product in the future was 30.4%. Dr. David Hammond out of the University of Waterloo just recently published research to say for the first time in years, our youth rates of tobacco use are increasing, which is alarming to us. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So that was really talking about the research in relation to the products. What we wanted to outline for you in this slide was really to show you what's going on in the rest of the province. So where Niagara Falls right now is our bylaw currently applies to tobacco, cannabis, and vaping products and applies within municipal and regional properties. So if you look on the left side of your screen, those would be all of the municipalities that are in similar types of bylaw situations to us. All the ones on the right-hand side are the ones that are more restrictive than our current bylaw is. And where they're moving their bylaws towards are places like not only municipal or regional properties, but also places like beaches, recreational trails, 9 meters from public entrances. Some of them, like Richmond Hill and Markham, have moved towards all public places, and other places are also working towards restricting the use of water pipe. So next I'm going to bring Melanie forward, and Melanie's going to talk to you about our public and our local area municipality consultation results and our recommendations moving forward.
All right, thanks, Diana. So I'm going to share with you the results of our public consultation that happened earlier this year. So acting on the CAO's recommendation to ask the public how they felt about our interim bylaw, which included cannabis and vaping products, we wanted to seek the opinions of the residents in Niagara to see how they felt about that bylaw. And also, in addition, ask them about additional locations where we might want to look forward to moving the bylaw to additional locations as well. So this was launched March 7th and ran through April 5th of this year in 2019. And it was mostly an online survey as well as paper copies. And it was primarily promoted through Facebook, Twitter, as well as our local area municipalities' websites. And the survey was open to residents 19 years of age and older. So here's a large chart. There's a lot of information on this chart, but I do want to draw a few things to your attention on this chart. So first of all, it has the population estimate according to the most recent 2016 census. It also has the number of Niagara residents who responded to our survey, as well as the response rate. A couple things we wanted to point out. That first of all, in the top row is the number of respondents we had to our survey was over 5,000 individuals in Niagara responded to this survey. And that was over 5 times the amount that we had desired based on our previous surveys. So we were really pleased with that, and that actually reached within 4 days. We had over succeeded our survey respondents. Another thing I wanted to point out was if you look at the proportion of Niagara residents through municipalities, you can actually see that the response rates are quite similar across the board through each of the municipalities. So it wasn't weighed strongly within the municipalities which have, the larger population. So we were quite happy with that. And as well as if you look at the proportion of total survey respondents as well. So just wanted to point that out, that we felt that this was fairly good representation of Niagara based on the amount of people that responded to our survey. I won't draw your attention to, I will draw your attention to some additional background information in the package that we included, which had the Speak Up and Win report. So just in order to save time for our presentation tonight, I won't go through all the background information, but you can find demographic information about the respondents. Again, we feel it was quite representative of the Niagara region. Okay, sorry. So now to the exciting part of the survey. So when asked about their support for updating our bylaw to include cannabis and vaping products, the public actually responded, over 75% supported the interim bylaw. I'm sorry, I'm going ahead of myself here. And when asked about that support, over half actually strongly supported these recommendations. And the reasons why they strongly supported these recommendations were that it reduces secondhand smoke exposure, was the biggest one, as well as it provides a healthy environment to live and play in, and it reduces litter as well. Okay, so knowing that over 75% approved supported the bylaw, just under a quarter opposed the bylaw. And when asked how strongly they opposed, it was only about 10% of those who opposed strongly. And the main reasons for opposing the bylaw were that it inconveniences people who smoke or vape, as well as the belief that the bylaw would not be complied with. All right, when asked about additional locations, we asked about potential for including beaches, trails, 9 meters from public entranceways, as well as outdoor community meeting areas. So this was how the public responded according to including one or more of these locations. So over 84% agreed that we should include additional locations in our bylaw, and about 15% not. When asked about the specific individual locations, you can see that the support varies by location. So as high as 79.2% for the 9-meter radius from the entranceways of public buildings, as well as 56% for the municipal trails. But what's important to point out here is that more than half the sample supports adding each of these additional locations. And then support, we asked additionally about if people would feel that they would be able to self-enforce the bylaw as community members. And we received about 38.5% of people said that they would feel comfortable telling somebody who's smoking or vaping in a restricted area to move to an unrestricted area. So that actually shows that the public is ready to help enforce this bylaw. So overall, we feel that these results are very favorable in terms of, and they're very similar to the sentiment back in 2012 when we asked the public how they felt about our original bylaw, suggesting that the community is ready and willing to support progressive and restrictive policies. So how did we come to all of this work? So back in January, we had a committee that was launched through our local area CAOs. They suggested representation from each of the municipalities, and we had several representatives from the following disciplines. We had folks from bylaw and enforcement, planning and development, legal services, building services, health and safety, and even a CAO. And what this group did was we met from February until April. We reviewed some of the background information that Diana just presented, as well as the overlapping bylaw and the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. This group also was instrumental in developing the survey that was launched to the public, as well as reviewing the results by municipality as well. And then at that point, at the very end, the group was asked whether or not they supported amendments and what those amendments look like, and each municipality was able to support or oppose at that point in time. So as a group, the following recommendations were made to amend the current bylaw so that it would include cannabis and vaping in our current bylaw, and that in addition, the following additional locations would be added to this bylaw. So one would be the 9 meters from the public entranceways. Second would be the recreational trails, and third would be the regional beaches. So thank you for your attention this evening, and on the screen are the recommendations that we would like to move this work forward.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any members of council that have a question I'd like to raise at this time? Okay, Councillor Trombetta.
It's more Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's more directed. Thank you for your presentation, ladies. You know, it is the way of the world we are living in now. It's going smoke-free, which I don't have a problem with, and I know all the vaping and obviously the new marijuana rules are kind of coming into play. So it's a tough task to deal with, but you know, I appreciate you guys coming out and educating us with this stuff. The question I had to you, Mr. Mayor, is if we get into these bylaws and stuff, do we have the actual resources to monitor our parks and our city facilities? Like, you know, we have, you know, a library all the way in Casterville, you know, someone could be smoking there, and a library all the way in Longport. Like, I'm just saying, we have a lot of facilities that are sporadic throughout all our greater West Lincoln, and do we have enough resources to implement and to help save bud out, if that's the case? So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Madam CAO, if that's possible, maybe get some answers there.
Through you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Trombetta, this is actually a question for the regional staff.
Okay.
This is a regional bylaw, and I think they're going to be explaining that what they require to pass the regional bylaw is a triple majority. So the regional council, the
local area municipalities
and
as
then
a majority.
and then a proportion of the population that are represented by those municipalities.
Okay.
But it is a regional bylaw responsibility. So I'll turn that over to you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Our regional bylaw allows for local bylaw officers to also enforce, but my team includes 5 tobacco enforcement officers. And as you know, 5 enforcement officers can't be in every place in
Correct.
Niagara at the same time. So what we really are looking for is kind of what Melanie was talking about in terms of there is some sense of public enforcement as well. So it's really educating the public and helping them to understand what the rules are. If you think back years ago when we didn't have these types of prohibitions against using tobacco products within spaces, you know, it wasn't uncommon to have smoking within all different types of indoor settings. And you can see that that has changed over time, and not due to only the work of our team, but really due to the public sentiment. And I think that's the work of our team right now. We will have to educate the public. How we respond to complaints how we respond to changes in the bylaw will be based on complaints. And it'll be based on progressive enforcement. So what we're really trying to do is educate the public first. If there's areas of non-compliance, we will be issuing warnings. And if we have to, we will move towards enforcement. But we're hoping to have, you know, an area where we can work with our bylaw officers, hopefully to educate individuals within the municipalities so we can all understand and comply with the law.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Tang and Mrs. Sagan. So I understand this is the idea, no smoking, no vaping in public places. Is there no designation at all for anyone for any specific areas, or how is it working? I'm all new to this, so please, if you can just help me out.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. So how the bylaw works currently is it really only applies to municipal and regional properties at this point. And there are certain places that are excluded. For example, the beaches and the trails were excluded last time. And that's what we're proposing this time, to increase where we would include the bylaw and where it would apply. So this would be now 9 meters from public entrances, and how we define that would be any place of employment, but also any condos or apartment buildings, and then beaches and recreational trails.
So, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to them. So I'll just throw out, for instance, we have a leisurePlex where there's a bunch of soccer fields, people going on. So the idea would be to have no designation at all in those places for, as sporadic as the property is, there would be no designation at all, or not? Like, how would it work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the research has really shown that designated smoking areas aren't the most effective way of putting forward policy. So what we do have is parking lots, really. That's what I would say. So when
Okay.
we're at a park, the area that we would redirect people to would be the parking
Okay,
lot
that's what I'm
or the
asking.
sidewalk. So there are places they can go to within close proximity.
And the only reason I was asking that is because, you know, obviously the marijuana, people with medicinal needs and stuff like that, they need to do, you know, to
Yes.
have, so I was just looking for designated areas which people are directed to. So parking lots is where they, what ideally is what you're gonna direct them to. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate your presentation.
Councillor Rayner.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. You initially stated that there was 12,000 or 16,000 deaths a year with tobacco, is that correct? And
Yes.
that it costs 7.5 billion in health costs, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you also state that cannabis, effective cannabis, is the same as tobacco?
We said that through you, Mr. Mayor, that there are certain chemicals in cannabis smoke that are similar to that of tobacco smoke.
So I find this rather ironic. I believe the government over the years has banned flavored tobacco.
Correct?
And I believe a few years ago, they went to ban menthol tobacco in the hopes of reducing smoking. And then October the 17th last year, they decided to open up to the whole country that we can smoke up on marijuana, but don't worry, that won't kill you like tobacco did. Is there something hypocritical or something in this just doesn't add up? You're working about preventing smoking in the workplace, and the federal government comes out with a new idea to stink up the whole place with marijuana, but that's okay, it's not tobacco. Does it not seem we're going backwards?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
Well, it seems like you're,
A federal government representative,
You're-
not a Niagara region individual.
I know.
You're asking the wrong people here.
it's just that you're trying to reduce something, and the government last fall just opened the whole floodgate, which totally discredited everything they did in the past, because if they were really consistent, which what they have done in the past, they would do like the U.S. and say, not in my country, because two reasons. Now, most people don't like it. It stinks, it smells, and number two, it's not good for your health, so we're not going to make it legal. But Health Canada knows that this will kill people, and this will also cost a fortune in taxes, but we'll legalize it.
I think,
This makes no sense.
I know, I think your questions are somewhat rhetorical to the ladies here present because
I
they don't
just feel
represent
that they're
Health Canada.
spinning their
Yeah.
wheels.
I know.
I'm sorry, it's not that what you're doing is wrong, it's just that it's obvious the federal government is playing games, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. The deaths are still going to occur, the healthcare costs are still going to occur, and you're fighting a losing battle because we just opened a whole new area of smoking now.
Yeah.
Hello? Like, really?
Agreed.
Welcome to Canada.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comments. Go ahead, Councilor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, thank you, ladies, for your presentation tonight. One of the things that you said there, and I know I read through the Speak Up and Win presentation that we were provided, was that the growing number of youths, and that it's actually, whether it's through vaping or tobacco or cannabis, is on the rise. And I think that's something worth noting. And I think, and maybe it's not too far of a stretch, but I think having any kind of bylaw in place, yeah, we might not necessarily have the manpower to enforce it all the time, but it's just like having a seatbelt in the car, right? You kind of educate people, and it's just a way of kind of getting that out there. Not everybody gets caught without their seatbelt in the car, but that you're supposed to wear a seatbelt, and I think this is a good stride towards that. So I definitely know myself I could support something like this. I think it's important, and we got to start with education, and then not to kind of go too far on it, but again, through Mr. Mayor, to even Councilor Rayner's remarks, I understand his frustration there. I think it's important to note that cannabis as a whole isn't just smoked. I'm guessing there's many different ways people are using that product for medical purposes. That isn't just impacting their neighbors or their friends, just outdoor leisurely. But at the same time, I agree. I understand the frustration of that. I think it's just important that we kind of stay on track here, and this is about taking care of what's going on in our backyard. So again, thank you very much for your presentation.
Anyone else? Okay, Councilor Rayner for a second time.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Riley with regards to the fact that there are more uses of marijuana other than smoking. And I kind of enjoyed it when I went to the States last month when the U.S. Customs were bringing the dogs down the rows, and they were pulling the cars over, and they said a lot of Canadians don't realize that no matter what you put this product in, it's the U.S. and they're having dogs going everywhere. It was kind of an interesting thing to watch. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, we have a motion at this time. It's moved by Councilor Cody and seconded by Councilor, can I get a seconder? Councilor Riley? Okay, Councilor Cody, go ahead. Yep.
So this is 6B. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Riley, that the Council of the Township of Westlake consents to the passage of bylaw number 2019-52 of the Regional Municipality of Niagara, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 112-2013, a regional bylaw to protect children and vulnerable persons from exposure to outdoor secondhand smoke.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution, moved by Councillor Cody, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, ladies. And at this time, I'd like to call up Mike Crow from IBI Group with respect to a presentation on C-Card zoning bylaw amendment. You're on, just insert, yeah.
Chip.
There we go.
My name is Mike Crow, C-R-O-U-G-H. I'm a senior planner with IBI Group. I'd like to say good evening to members of council, members of staff, members of the public. I'm here to speak to the proposed zoning amendment for C-Card RV. Regional Road 7568, Regional Road 20, proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I have a presentation prepared, but before I do, I did listen to the previous speakers, some members of the public who mentioned a few specific items. And before I begin my presentation, I would like to just respond or add some comment to those. So the first speaker mentioned the fence height and indicated he wasn't prepared to accept a 6-foot tall fence in our proposal, but would accept 12. Then we heard some comments on the drainage, and we hope that that would be considered going forward in future applications. And then lastly was keep the area within the hamlet really as residential. And then the second speaker got up and mentioned that also fencing. I didn't like the original proposal we had of a 6-foot fence. Also mentioned drainage issues. But lastly indicated that agreed with the staff recommendations. And that's really where I want to start my presentation, because that's really the focus of my efforts here tonight, and that's really what my presentation is about. We were here some time ago for a public meeting, and we definitely heard the comments from the public, and we've done our best to accommodate all of those comments in our revised concept. We've also worked with staff on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. We reviewed those provisions, we reviewed the mapping, and we're willing to accept all of those things. And so really I just wanted to walk council through some of our thoughts behind that and end with a concluding remark. So just to reiterate, this is the existing site here right now. It is technically two different properties. We have on the right-hand side of your screen, the main facility site with the buildings. That's the main operations site. And then to the left, bottom left-hand corner, that was the previous expansion area, which was secured through previous zoning amendments and planning approvals. And really it's that area to the bottom left-hand corner that we would like to expand upon, and the proposed zoning amendment before you would permit for that. So just some background on C-Card RV. It's an established business. It's a large employer. There's approximately 100 employees right now. As I mentioned, there's been previous expansions of this site through building construction and site acquisitions. They are currently using off-site storage for used and new vehicles, and that situation really is not working for them, and hence the need for the expansion on lands that they own, which are contiguous. So the purpose of the application really is to rezone these lands to allow for more surface storage of the RVs for sale and lease, and this application responds to the immediate needs that C-Card RV has for that expansion. In terms of chronology, we started the pre-consultation process in July of last year. We were able to make a complete application in December. We proceeded to a public meeting in February of this year, and here we are now with a council meeting and a staff recommendation report. So our original application, we were looking to rezone the portion outside of the hamlet from the A agricultural to the A106, and that matched the existing site-specific permission which existed on the site already. So we were looking to expand that area. In addition, we looked at the portion in the Kimbo Hamlet, and we were looking to rezone a good component of that, or all of that, from RUR and RUR 68 to a C3 commercial zone. And then we also proposed addressing some of the on-site features to actually redesignate agricultural land to EP zone. And that gave us this concept plan. So this is what we looked at originally. We presented this concept at the public meeting in February, and we heard some comments on a couple of things, and those are consistent with the proposal as it's evolved and the staff recommendation. And this is our previous zoning schedule. So what we heard through the process, we heard some comments from the public in terms of some discussion items prior to the public meeting, at the public meeting, and following it. And we also heard some technical comments. So one of them was that the proposed rezoning from the RUR rural residential to C3 was not considered to be compatible with the existing residential hamlet. There was concerns with the interface of the proposed use with the abutting residential lands. We heard also that there was a woodland on site that required a 30-meter buffer setback, and that there might be a possibility to explore storage of the vehicles in the 1-foot ponding depth within the floodplain. So all those items coalesced to produce our revised concept and has driven really the draft bylaw provisions before you. So solutions, the proposed rezoning and the RUR to C3, we've removed that from our application, so we're reserving a 0.4 hectare or 1 acre of land in the hamlet area to be remain zoned as residential. The draft zoning bylaw schedule from staff provides that. This is actually slightly larger than the 1 acre, 0.4 hectares, that accommodates the regional road widening. So once that is taken off, we'll have exactly the 0.4 hectares. The concerns with the interface of the proposed use and the abutting residential lands, we've done a number of things here. So we've maintained generally a 2-meter landscape buffer that consists of a 1.5 meter clear area. And then within that space, we are proposing a solid board fence to a minimum height of 10 feet with a fencing offset of 0.5 meters from the abutting property lines, and that's all abutting the residential properties. And you'll see in the staff recommendation, we didn't propose this, but we are agreeing to it as well. There's no parking of motorized vehicles within 10 meters of a residential zone. And we're also maintaining the existing berm on site, which abuts 2 properties at the common lot line around the hamlet boundary. We did hear from the region that the woodlot to the west required a 30-meter setback, and we've accepted that comment. We've worked that 30-meter buffer into the proposed zoning boundary, and that's reflected in the staff recommendation as well. So all along the westerly portion of the site, we are able to expand slightly into that area, and we are expanding to the limit of that 30-meter buffer, but we are providing that and buffering that feature. And then lastly, in terms of additional storage area, one of the comments we heard in the public meeting is, can you look to the south of the existing area? And we did that. Thanks to Mr. Treble, he alerted us to an existing site in the township where this similar scenario was implemented. And so we contacted NPCA, and they are willing, and their policies do allow for storage in the 1-foot ponding depth. So the proposed zoning schedule also reflects that. So just in sum, we've reviewed all the staff, agency, and public comments to this point. We prepared a modified proposal. We submitted that for staff review, and this included further public and agency review. We have worked with staff to further develop and refine the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to address those comments and concerns. And what is before you in the staff recommendation, we agree with and we support. Sicard RV requires this zoning bylaw approval for expansion of their operations, and obviously the proposed recommendation will permit this. So really the main goal is achieved, and I think we've hit the notes for all the commenting agencies and the public, and we're satisfied. So that concludes my presentation, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Crow, for your presentation. I know we had various conversations this past week, and obviously in the past, myself and the mayor dealing with this issue at hand. I'd like to say thanks for some of the changes that you did make. Just a couple questions, just to reiterate on the process. So any properties that abut the C-Cards new proposal here will be distinguished with a minimum of a 10-foot fence. Is that correct, Mr. Crow?
So through you, Mayor, the provisions before you, the language requires a 10-foot minimum visual barrier, which we propose as a fence in our concept plans. And that provision applies to all abutting residential zones or properties. The one exception being the area to the south where there's the existing berm already. So there's a separate provision in the zoning bylaw that's being carried forward from the existing provisions to require that to be maintained.
So that maintains that.
Exactly.
Berm as well.
So, and our plans always showed that. So we are cutting that berm out to an extent, but then leaving it where it exists, abutting those properties to the north, and then everywhere else would have the 10-foot
So,
fence.
just for curiosity, so that berm, and actually I've been to the property multiple times, that berm continues like this, does the fence pretty much drop down? Because that berm is almost, I would probably say, oh God, so Brian, maybe you can help me out, how tall is the berm with the fence there? 13 feet, 14 feet, Mr. Crow, maybe
Yes,
possible? So what happens is that corner where that meets just drops, it would be dropping down to a minimum of 10 feet and then straight across the abutting properties, is that correct, Mr. Crow?
Through the mayor, so we're proposing on our concept plan some gentle regrading of that feature, so there's a bit of a transition,
That's
right?
what
So
I'm
it's not,
asking.
we're not cutting a wall and putting a retaining wall there, so we have to work that out through our grading plans. That hasn't really changed from our proposal. We've always maintained that from day one, and we're willing to work with the technical review of the site plan to make that possible. And as you heard, there were some comments from the members of the public about the grading and drainage. So having that cutback of the berm in that corner would allow us to accommodate some of those grading and drainage issues and bring that onto the site and redirect it. So we're trying to balance all that at that corner.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that, thank you.
Councillor Ganand.
Okay. To you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Crow, as well, for this presentation. When I sat through the last and listened to resident after resident after resident come forward and talk about their importance of the hamlet and the maintaining of the residential section where they live, to them, that seemed to be key. And so for me, I think that the fact that that concession was made by Sicards is really it's really showing a neighborly approach to solving this problem, and I do appreciate that. I was out to visit the property as well, and drainage remains an issue, so I'm happy to hear also that's high on your list of things that need to be addressed, so thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your presentation. At this time, I'd like to call upon Regional Councillor Woodavine to make his remarks to the council.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'm glad to be here again for giving you an update on ongoings at the region that pertain to the West Lincoln. I'd like to start this evening by thanking members of staff and council for putting together a wonderful program at our Canada Day celebration at Leisureplex this year. Our entertainment was enjoyed by all ages. An evening band helped us celebrate the community building. Fireworks were impressive with the help of having perfect weather. So thank you, Mayor Bosma, for taking holidays and asking me to host and MC this wonderful community event on your behalf. So
Anytime. Holidays for you.
a further update from my last update last month on where we were with Fort. So myself and CAO Bev Henry and Director Beth Shaw of Fort had a meeting in late June after my update, and Beth explained that funding came from Niagara Prosperity Initiative for starting up Fort in Smithville and Caister. So this she had mentioned to us that the funding had been in decline since 2014 to today, and the funding was for a startup, but not a long-term commitment from this fund. So we discussed our partners in the community and who could possibly support this program over the long term. So we came up with some ideas and kind of took them back and are working on that. So participation, just for some statistics, has been about 40 participants at the Smithville Center and approximately about 25 at the Caister location. So this year, NPI had cut funding from $80,000 to $40,000, and this meant that the Fort would, be responsible for covering about $72,000 to keep both centers open. So this was obviously out of reach for the Fort group. So they had to make a tough decision, which was to close Caister in the short term while they came up with other solutions. But in Smithville, they still require an additional $25,000 in order to keep this center open. So just so that council understands that they are still challenged here in our community by keeping the center open. So I agree to have some discussions with staff at the region, see if we can find alternative sources of funding, and Beth would look at other possible fundraising opportunities in our community to help Fort be more sustainable into the future. So any help and ideas from council would also be helpful moving forward to keep this this program for our youth operating in our community. So I will probably update council as things come about for our fort. So I just wanted to respond. There was concerns in our community where that program was, and so we did some background work, and we'll be moving forward. We had a public works meeting last week, and we discussed some long-range plans for long-term care facilities here in Niagara, and I thought it'd be interesting for councillors to understand that's an integral part of the region of Niagara is looking after long-term care here in Niagara. And there's 33 long-term health units or facilities with a total of like 3,700 beds in Niagara. So 8 are operated by the Niagara region, with about 957 under the responsibility of the Niagara region. 3 are slated for some redevelopment, and the first one that's being up for redevelopment is Lynnhaven Homes, and it's accommodating about 260 residents, with creating a community living concept versus just there's an Alzheimer's area there, and there's also a hospice there, and there's a large piece of property. So it's about a 50s style, so very bungalow, and they're looking at creating like a four-story with Alzheimer's Incorporated, and this is basically for efficiencies. So the goal is to, it's being presented at our budget this year to work in there, but looking at completion date in about 2022. So it's kind of interesting, and a thought, actually speaking with MP Sam Osterhoff, he had asked myself and said, has West Lincoln shown any interest into applying for some long-term health beds as the province is looking to expand that? So I just kind of put that out there. Nobody has to respond, but I think it should be something that should be discussed by West Lincoln Council on how we may fit that into a long-range plan in our community, or because I know there's been some residents that have had to stay outside of our community because we haven't had those facilities, and as our community grows, it may be something that we may want to look at incorporating. And then the next day we had our planning and economic development meeting, and we had a presentation by this Tourism Partnership of Niagara. So some interesting numbers that may attract something we can do here in West Lincoln. So in 2017, the region of Niagara experienced about 13 million tourists, 5 million overnight, about 8 million in a same-day visitor. They basically spent about $2.5 billion in Niagara and helped support about 40,000 jobs. And also what came out of that was sport tourism is something that has high potential growth for Niagara because they dine and they lodge, and also in 2017 saw about 260,000 people come out and participate in the sports tourism. So kind of discuss some strategies of how to have a central office and promote and cultivate opportunities in this field. New opportunities will arise as we are hosting the games in 2021 here in Niagara, and there will be obviously some new facilities and opportunities and recognition in our community, and I would believe that there's opportunities for us to promote our new facility and maybe be part of some of this sports tourism because of our new facility. And lastly, as mean a lot to everybody is our waste collection. Just an update on where we are with the new contract as moving forward. So by the end of this month, the RFP will be released, and the closing of the RFP will be the end of August. And September, October, staff will review and evaluate the RFP and draft and finalize a report to regional council. So by October, November, the contract will be awarded to the successful candidate, and then equipment, it will take approximately 10 to 12 months to order equipment, looking at a starting date of a new contractor in 2020. So that's, I know we've had some concerns with the present contractor. We've, through the region, made some adjustments here in West Lincoln to improve that level of service. So that kind of gives councillors an idea when that new contractor with its new rolling stock will show up. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodavine. Comments, questions? I saw Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Woodavine. Thank you for ending off on that note. That's what I wanted to bring up, obviously. You know, summer days are here and garbage is getting thrown all over the place. Not by residents, by the existing contractor. So I hope this existing contractor, which I know it's not out of council's control, is not on the RFP or eligible to bid for the RFP, because I've had nothing but complaints. I've had to actually take pictures of what's transpired in some of the areas, which they know it's obviously a regional issue, not a municipal issue, but this new contractor, and even to myself, you know, my recycle bins, they were never broken before. Now they're cracked, they're broken, like people are having to replace things, which is an extra cost to the township because we have to come pick them up because, you know, they're getting broken and tossed around. And I have video footage to prove that. So I hope this contractor, which I know you've stressed your concerns to the region, and I'm just pleased to continue to stress your concerns because we have nothing but bad things to say because it's terrible. I've never experienced this in all the years living in West Lincoln. Is what's transpired these past couple months, Councillor Woodavine. So I hope you can please voice our issues through West Lincoln to the region because, again, and you've lived out here just as long, and I'm quite sure you've never experienced this sort of what's transpired. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to go to Councillor Rayner. Councillor Rayner, if you could just, I know you probably want to weigh in this new comments. We had a long meeting. Go ahead.
Thank you. This garbage collection company that we have now only started last year, I believe. Did they not? Prior to that, it was Modern, I think we had for the longest time.
MTerra.
What's that?
It was MTerra.
But was it a short contract? Like, I thought it's like a 3 or 5 year contract. These people started, we had trouble when they started last fall because when it got cold in the winter, nobody came to pick up. Like, we had weeks where we got no pickup. Now it's a little different. Now it's nice warm weather. I take my garbage down to the end of the road and then I go back later on the day and I pick up what's left that they don't want to take and I bring it back to the house. Something I've never done before in the 17 years I've lived in Caister. They're very bad at what they do, and I guess that's not a secret. But what I don't understand is I thought they'd be locked in a contract for 3 or 4 or 5 years. They're already looking to replace them, and they haven't even done it a year yet, if I'm not mistaken. Can you update me on this?
Yeah.
So just give a kind of a brief synopsis of where we're at because you know.
MTerra was the Niagara Regional contractor. MTerra contract was extended and they were having difficulty meeting their obligations working with regional staff. They basically took West Lincoln and Lincoln and gave part of that contract to Canada Waste to help relieve MTerra. They had some vehicle issues and some employment issues, so that's why you've seen a different contractor, and this is all just helping solve the problem until we get to the new contract.
If I'm not mistaken, part of the reason why they failed to pick up the garbage last year because a lot of the employees failed the blood or urine tests. Would that be fair to say?
That could be so.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Albert, for all the keeping us up to date. I just wanted to make a statement that I'm very happy to hear the progress that you're able to find on the fort and bring that information back to us, because I know that does, that has affected quite a few families, as well as keeping the conversation just in all programs related to youth. I hope that you'll continue to represent us and fight for us, especially for other services such as the Early On Center too, which is the funding is managed through the region. So again, I appreciate you bringing that information and keeping that on your radar, because I know many families in all of our community really rely on those services and those opportunities, and it's a great program for kids of all ages. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Councillor Whitby. And we move forward with confirmation of minutes. Council minutes regular on June 24th. Councillor Ganan, you have those resolutions. There are two. First, it will be the open session of a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Trombetta that the minutes of the open session portion of the June 24th, 2019 regular council meeting be accepted.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution moved by Councillor Ganan and seconded by Councillor Trombetta. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Councillor Ganan, you have the second half.
Thank you. Also moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Trombetta that the confidential minutes relating to the closed session portion of the June 24th, 2019 regular council meeting be accepted, and that the minutes remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with exemptions provided in the Municipal Act.
That's unacceptable, as Councillor Trombetta has a conflict with these particular, that's why they were separated, so I need a second seconder. A re-seconder.
Okay, he was the only one here. Good pick.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution moved by Councillor Ganan, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Councillor Trombetta did not vote. There are no communications this evening. I'd like to make a couple of comments at this time. The first was June 29. The municipality had the opportunity to cut a ribbon on a new business that is established in our community. It's very exciting, but Big Country Raw, otherwise known as BCR, opened their doors. I heard a report that there were some 3,000 people that attended that grand opening. It was so it was well attended by the community and by customers, suppliers, family, and friends of Big Country Raw. It was a warm day, but the dogs didn't seem to mind. And we're very pleased to have Big Country Raw established in our community, and it, I think it's indicative of the excitement that is being generated in our employment lands area of our municipality. The second thing that I'd like to just state, and while I was unable to attend, I heard nothing but good reports about our Canada Day celebrations, and I do thank Councillor Whitby for taking the reins for the day and emceeing the event. And I was enjoying Canada Day by Muskoka Lake, and so my family had enjoyed a nice vacation. Those kind of conclude my comments for this month. Moving on, we have, there are no reports of committee, there's no reconsideration, and no notice of motion to rescind. And we have, under other business, that all items listed below are considered to be routine, non-controversial, and to be approved by one resolution. Unless the item is pulled. So we have our list of consent agenda items as follow, and there are 11, so I'm just going to quickly go through these. Actually, why should I do that? Do you have them all? Yeah.
I'm not going to read them all.
Okay, anyways.
Somebody has to.
Somebody has
No, she says no.
Okay, all right, good. Councillor Jonker, you have the resolution.
That council hereby approve the following consent agenda items. Item 1 to 10B and are hereby received for information, and item 11B and is hereby received, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted. Seconded, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cody. Sorry.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution moved by Councillor Junker, seconded by Councillor Cody. Any items to be pulled? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on, Section B, Planning, Building, Environmental Items. Planner 2, Garrett Boomer, and Director of Planning Brian Treble, report PD 111-19. Councillor Rayner, you have that resolution. That would be 13, yeah, 14B. No, the 14's on the previous page in the agenda.
All right, so I move by myself and second by Council Riley that report PD-111-19 regarding 5207 Canberra Road site plan agreement and authorization bylaw file number 2100-006-19 dated July 15, 2019 be received, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the site plan agreement.
Councillors, you've heard the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Rayner, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Item C, Planner 2, Garrett Boomer, Director of Planning, report number PD 109-19. Councillor Riley, you have that resolution.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and second by Councillor Cody, that report PD-1009-19 regarding comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments dated July 15, 2019 be received, and that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that a bylaw to implement the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment submitted by the Township of West Lincoln be approved.
Councillors, you've heard the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Cody. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Item D is dealing with report PD 116-19. Councillor Trombetta, you have that resolution.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Council Riley that report PD 116-19 regarding Sicard Holiday Campers, Micro IBI Group Agent, application for rezoning file number 1601-024-18, dated July 15, 2019, be received, and that the section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required. That the application for zoning bylaw amendment 1601-024-18 submitted by Sicard Holiday Campers and the IBI Group as amended be approved.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution. Moved by Councillor Trombetta, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cody.
I'll let Mike go because I think he's going to do what I was going to remind everybody of.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, back under conflict of interest initially, Councillor Trombetta in the past had declared a conflict, and you clearly outlined it in this one. I had declared a conflict on C-cards a long time ago, 4 months, 6 months ago, but it was not listed, but I still want to retain my conflict of interest, although you highlighted Councillor Trombetta's because it's part of this package, but did not highlight my conflict that I had in the previous meeting with C-cards. Okay. I don't understand why the inconsistency.
I thought it got missed. I just figured it got missed.
It's not personal.
No, I didn't take it that way. I'm just.
So then I'm going to let the clerk speak and clear this.
The declarations that are made at the beginning of the meeting deal with the minutes that are being approved, not with respect to applications, separate applications. So I don't look back to 5 months ago to see if there was a conflict So I only look at the minutes that are being approved this evening, and that's why Councillor Toretto's was on there, because it was the June 24th council meeting.
So if you have a conflict, you can declare it.
I do have a conflict, but because it wasn't mentioned
Yeah.
here, I wanted to make sure that it was still carried forward. But
No,
obviously
you have to
not.
do
I
that.
have to bring it up again?
Yes.
Then I'll bring it up again.
Okay, so Councillor Rain is going to declare conflict and fill out the paperwork later, yeah.
And Mr. Mayor, with regards to reading the final bylaws, I passed that on to Councillor Riley because that is also 219-64 is part of it. So I'd rather not move it or second it.
Okay, we'll get to that part. All right, so any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried, and it should be noted that Councillor Rayner did not participate or vote. Thank you very much. Section or 14E, Treasurer Donna DeFilippis. Report RFDT-17-19-2018. Councillor Cody, you have that resolution.
I do. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Riley. One, that report RFD-T-17-19 regarding the 2018 draft financial statements and audit results dated July 15th, 2019 be received. And two, that the 2018 draft financial statements attached as Appendix A to this report be approved. And three, that the 2018 report to council attached as Appendix B to this report be received.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution. Moved by Councillor Cody and seconded by Councillor Riley. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. And I should note that the pink pen is very pleasant to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Cody.
Okay, Section D, Manager of Roads Recommendation Report, RFD PW 11-2019. Councillor Ganan, you have that resolution?
I do, thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Trombetta. That report, RFD PW-11-2019, read council endorsement of the Township of West Lincoln Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan dated July 15th, 2019 be received. And two, that council hereby endorses the Township of West Lincoln's Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan for the Smithville Water Distribution System.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution moved by Councillor Ganan and seconded by Councillor Trombetta. Any comments or questions? Councillor Ganan.
Thank you. I have just a brief comment, Mr. Mayor, and that simply is to commend staff. The complacency of water facilities being looked after is what got Walkerton years ago into trouble. And I really do appreciate the fact that our staff are looking at past things and really keeping track of things to improve along the way. I was most impressed with that part of the report in particular, and I think that they should be commended. Thank you.
So do I. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Item 14G, it's a recommendation report, RFD PW 12-2019, and always stop warrant. Councillor Jonker, you have that resolution.
Yes, I do. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cody. That report RFD PW-12-2019 regarding always stop warrant regarding the intersection of Georgia Cacacos Drive and Oakdale Boulevard dated July 50, 2019 be received, and that council approve the recommended changes to the intersection, including moving the stop sign locations from Georgia Drive to Oakdale Boulevard, and that council pass a bylaw to amend the stop sign locations listed in Schedule P of the bylaw number 89-2000 as outlined in this report, and that council pass a bylaw to amend the parking restriction locations listed in Schedule C of bylaw 98-2000 as outlined in this report.
Councillors, you've heard the resolution moved by Councillor Jonker, seconded by Councillor Cody. Any comments? Oh, they're all lining up. All right, Councillor, I'm just going to say Riley, Trombetta, and then I'll go to Ganane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Paula, can I get a better understanding of why an intersection wouldn't merit always stop? Because from my understanding, if I could just give a little context, I've driven both ways, and as we see, like, you know, you're stopping one way and the other way you have to stop. So I understand where the confusion comes both ways. One of my other ideas was like, why wouldn't it just be always stop? Because I know one of the intersections I just naturally stop, and I realize, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to stop. So I go through, and I know I'm probably not the only person. I'm sure this is why this complaint's here. But then when I was reading everything, I realized it didn't qualify for an always stop. So I was just hoping you can maybe just educate me a little further why that is.
Okay, through the mayor to Councillor Riley, under the Ontario Traffic Manual, there's basically two requirements that have to be met for an all-way stop. The first requirement is on page 2 of your report, but the first requirement is the total vehicle volume for all the intersection legs have to exceed 300 vehicles during the highest hour of the day. And in addition to that, the volume split between the major and the minor roads cannot exceed 65-35. So the idea behind that is, you know, number of vehicles that has to exceed 350. So it has to be a busy intersection. And number two, the ratio of the vehicles on the major and minor road can't exceed that split.
Okay.
So it has to be somewhat, you know, it has to be, yeah.
Yeah. If I can go again. Okay, so now is that a recommendation or is that a requirement? Because I'm just trying to figure out where the liability would lie if we did put 4 stops or made an all-way stop. Like, obviously it'd be under, I guess that, I'm just wondering if it's a requirement or a recommendation as far as how that's written. Because even looking at it, I'm like, oh, well, if we go all-way stop, that's definitely not going to, and from my perspective, not going to increase, I guess, or increase the risk of accident there. So I was just wondering if that was more of a requirement or recommendation through that act.
Through the mayor to Councillor Riley, it is a requirement under the Traffic Ontario Manual, the Ontario Traffic Manual. You know, putting in a 4-way stop where it's not warranted does increase accidents and puts some additional liability on the town.
It does, sorry?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm saying?
It does put more liability on the town if you put an all-way stop where it's not warranted.
Okay.
Okay, there's been a number of studies out there, and that's why it's recommended in the manual.
So if I could ask one more question, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor, and through you. When this new change takes place, is there going to be some extra signage around? Because I imagine some people in their habits and routines going through some of those areas aren't going to expect it from one of the intersections there. I think it's the one closest to, I don't even know how to say this as well. Georgia Caucus in Oakdale. Is there going to be something else to help bring it to people's attention so we don't accidentally create an accident during that transition stage?
Through the mayor to Councillor Riley, it's clearly laid out in the manual how you change the stop sign location, so staff will follow that.
Okay.
It'll be an all-way stop for a certain duration of time, and notices will be delivered to residents explaining the change, and then we'll switch it over to moving the 2-way stop onto Oakdale.
Will there be something above it that just kind of says new? I'm just thinking of people who don't even live in the neighborhood who might go and travel and pick up family or friends, and I'm just envisioning someone going right through it, being used to how it was, just even with the all-way stop, and then they're like, you know, they transition from 2-way stop thinking it's an all-way stop, and then next thing you know, they're in an accident. So I was just curious if there's going to be a little extra emphasis on, hey, look at me, I'm here now.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Riley, it'll be well communicated to all the residents.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trombetta.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the questions were already answered. We've been dealing with the stop sign for, I'll probably say 3-4 years at least.
At least 2, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as long as notices through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Dirk, as long as public notices given to the residents, hand-delivered notices, I think that'd be great because, you know, they're going to think that why are we taking off the 2 stop signs and putting 2 stop signs on the other side where they've been really pushing before your term coming to West Lincoln, they were really pushing us for a 4-way stop. And then we did deem that it was against the traffic manual and I guess traffic obligation, you were not warranted there and we couldn't, but now we're taking 2 stop signs and putting them on the other side, so we kind of look like a little, like we're not, it sort of comes off like we don't know what we're doing, is way I'm coming off, but I understand that's the way it's supposed to be done, but the way it's transpired to the public is kind of look a little off, so at least public notice can, oh, can you, I think Mr. DePaula wants to add something there.
Sure.
Through the mayor to Councillor Trombetta, just a little bit of information, like when this development was developed, it obviously occurred in different phases. And Appendix B in your report kind of lays out the different phases of the development. And, you know, the 2-way stop on Georgia Cactus Drive was probably appropriate at one stage, at one point in time during this development. But once Phase 4, stages 2A and 2B were developed, really Oakdale Boulevard kind of became the major side street as opposed to Georgia Cactus. So that's why we're kind of recommending the change in the 2-way stop location.
No, and I totally agree with what you need to change to the more professional in this manner. Just to, the only thing was that, you know, some of the residents, and there was some strong residents that were in last term that were pushing for a 4-way stop, and now, you know, we're taking 2 stop signs and putting them on the other side. It kind of comes off, I understand the warrant for it, but it's just the way it transpires is a little different, right? Especially because we had a previous council actually advocating for it as well, and you know, the way it's going to transpire to the public is going to look like we don't know what we're doing. So at least if we get public knowledge out there that why it's happening, it's what I'm looking for, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that explanation is really good. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Ganay.
Thank you. I take a different tact on that, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think that it shows that we finally have done something about what they've been complaining about for a long period of time. It actually is 3 years ago next month that I first heard of this issue with the residents on Oakdale, and it can just continue to go on and go on and go on. They, in asking for something to slow down the traffic on Oakdale because of the number of children who live along there, actually were not at all pleased. They wanted something. They did not like the traffic calming measures, and they certainly hated that they had no parking in front of their own homes because of that. So I actually was very pleased to see that you had somehow creatively looked back far enough to come up with a solution that actually makes us look, I think, Councillor Trombetta, like we are finally finding a solution for the people rather than looking like we're not.
Yeah.
It may just look like it took us a while, but we got to a good solution, I think, for,
I agree with you,
for doing
Councillor
this.
You are correct, and totally 100% I agree with that statement. It's just that hopefully the public can see it the same way your perspective. If all the public sees it that perspective, I think we're right spot on. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I just have a quick question. So in an attempt in the previous term to provide solutions, and Councillor Ganay did mention the traffic calming measures, the narrowing to try to, will those be removed, adjusted? What's their function now that we've made this change?
I believe you're referring to like the some kind of delineators that were placed in the center of the road on
Some of
Oakdale.
those, yes.
Yeah,
And
those will be removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Miscellaneous items. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to the CAO for an update.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bilsma. This is always a great time for me to be able to talk about the staff and the good work they're doing and keeping their skills up and improving their skills. And this month we get to congratulate Lisa Casco-Young for doing 3 courses at Seneca College on the municipal tax administration. So she's furthering her skill set for that particular area. And then Barb Hutchinson had a banner month. She took 2 courses in the building area. One is the technical part 9 called the house building, the building envelope. And the reason why the 2012 was there is that when the course and the legislation was enacted. And then the other one is the legal process for building officials and designers. And again, those are great accomplishments by our staff, and we're thankful that they have the interest and the inclination to sign up for them.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the the Director of Planning to provide an update with regard to the withdrawal of the Pellicero rezoning application.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council will recall that a bylaw was passed to zone change property on the Pellicero farm on Highway 20, or Regional Road 20, to accommodate for a potential severance for the parents as part of a succession plan. The region expressed concern with the zoning approval and lodged an appeal. And Mr. Pellicero, rather than proceed with the appeal, has at this time suggested that he would like to withdraw that application and monitor the provincial policy changes that he anticipates will be changed down the road. So in order to proceed in that fashion, LPAT has asked that we pass a bylaw to repeal the previous zoning bylaw. So on the agenda as bylaw 16B is a bylaw to do just that. If that's appealed, then it means that the LPAT appeal is gone and there'll be no hearing.
Any comments or questions on that explanation? Okay. Thank you, Director. At this time, we're going to go to members of council remarks. At the conclusion of that, we're going to take a break. I need a coffee. My voice is not holding up. I don't know why. Maybe some kind of allergy or something. So we'll start at my right. Councillor Cody, anything that you?
I have nothing at this time, no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Jonker?
Yes, I'd just like to mention to councillors as well as to the public that the West Lincoln Chamber of Commerce is always hard at work, and they promote our community as best they can as a business. And I had it up on my email, but it disappeared. But just like to remind everybody of their free community barbecue, which is going to be on this July 27th at the new beautiful facility at West Lincoln Community Center. I know last year they held it at the train station. This year it was a bit of a debate, but I think it was wise that they moved it to our beautiful facility for volume wise and that. So just, want to remind everybody from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the 27th to attend that. I think last year was the first time and it was great. And looks like there's a lot of stuff to enjoy as a family. So
Great, thank you. Councillor Gannon?
That's the only thing I had on my list for this month as well. So other than thanking staff for Canada Day.
Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make note, you've already commented about it, but I saw you, as well as Councillor Gannon, at the Big Raw Big Country Raw there. And it was, what a great day they had. Like, we had a wonderful weekend just with the Canada Long weekend there right afterwards. Things that, like, I went there not fully knowing, but they had like face painting and bouncy castles and canine unit and a petting zoo for the puppies, and it was just like, it was a really great experience. The one thing I thought was really remarkable, and I think that, a lot of businesses can learn from the stride that they're taking, is that the engineering component alone that they have inside that facility is like state of the art. And I won't go too much beyond that, because I could probably talk about that facility. I was really impressed with it. Other than I really appreciated how they were like the one component where how they were basically recycling energy to warm portions of the floor that was otherwise would just be dispelled. So it was a fantastic facility. I'm very proud to recognize that business in our community. So I think that's definitely worth noting. As far as everything else go, Canada Day was wonderful. I know you unfortunately had to suffer by the lake there, Mr. Mayor, but if you get a chance to log on to Facebook there, I did post the firework display. We actually had a lot of people commenting how wonderful that was and how amazing that was, so it was a lot of good PR there. Even some of the things that took place at the event, that video gaming trailer was a hit. I managed to get in there a couple times myself with my kids, and so they were glued to all these different screens, and it was probably about, at one point, geez, there must have been like 20 people in there, all crammed in there. But that was great, as well as whatever that, I don't even know what the thing was called, with people were like wrapped in like bubble balls and bouncing off each other, and I was just like at that, I'm like, oh my goodness, just hoping someone didn't break their leg on public property there. But overall, that was a huge hit. And again, thank you to Regional Councillor Woodavine for his opening remarks there. And Councillor Gannon came in and gave our blessing on behalf of the council and the township there. So that was really wonderful. And it was a great event all around. I did kind of have a question. I guess I don't know if this is really the best time to ask it.
These are for remarks?
Yeah, so
No
questions, eh? Okay, so other than that, I guess I'll figure out how to ask those on the new business there. So I believe that was pretty much it for the month.
Thank you, Councillor Trombetta.
I got a request. I know you said you wanted to have a break, Mr. Mayor, but can we do bylaws first and then break before we go into confidential? If you can push yourself through it, please.
Go ahead, as long as I don't have to read out bylaws. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, no problem. Councillor Rayner?
Thank you. Yes, I've just got one thing with regards to the publication again in News Now from Thursday, June the 13th, where this Helen McGregor, Superintendent of Curriculum and Student Achievement, was quoted as saying that the DSBN is working closely with the Ministry of Health in order to control the concerns that the parents have with regards to students going to this new school. Councillor Riley gave me a copy of, he sent a message off to the West Lincoln School Board trustee, Doug Newton, who replied and said, as you know, safety is one of the most important priorities. DSBN staff have been in contact with various agencies, including the town of Lincoln, Niagara Region Public Health, the Ministry of the Environment, Parks and Conservation, the Ministry of Agriculture and Agricultural Food Canada regarding the school site's proximity to the UP cannabis facility. We have learned three things. One, Niagara Public Health said there is no scientific evidence to suggest cannabis odor present any type of health risk. This almost sounds like the turbine thing over again, doesn't it? Prevailing winds come down from the escarpment and will blow odors away from the school. That's a good theory. The facility is designed for production and not distribution to the public and is separated. The important thing is I called the newspaper to say, was there an error in this publication? And Mr. Williscraft said I would be in deep sheep with the DSBM if I misquoted them, so what you see is what I was told. It is obvious by the answer from Mr. Newton, who is being evasive, saying that the Niagara Region Public Health is the one looking after it. They have no jurisdiction over a federal operation. They have no control over the Ministry of Health. So the bottom line that I want the public to realize is that the Ministry of Health controls and regulates what's going on out there, but they are doing absolutely nothing. Nothing that the school board has done. They have not contacted the Ministry of Health because no one's been able to do that. So if they think the school is in a safe situation, the smell is not a problem, and the grow-up's not a problem, then they're badly mistaken, because DSBN can do absolutely nothing about it because they have got no word with the ministry any more than the other 12 municipalities in the region of Niagara. So let the truth be out there that it's out of control down there, and if it stinks and it smells, they're saying, don't worry, it's not going to hurt you. But it's obnoxious, it's unnecessary, and obviously people, the parents have brought this up. They don't want their students in that kind of environment, and basically the District School Board of Niagara has tried to fluff it off, and the truth is nothing can be done about it unless something changes, maybe in the election this fall. I don't know. That's the only thing that I just want the truth to be out there. I don't want people to be misled.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam CEO, Madam Clerk, anything? Okay, so this is the one that, because we got new items for business, so I thought there might be some discussion on that, so. Yeah. Yeah, so at this time, we're going to take a break. We're going to recess for just a little bit, and